Welcome to the walkthrough of frequently made mistakes for assignment 3 in my summer 2023 version of CS 3251. First, please make sure you comment your code. Code that is not commented will not be reviewed. This is very important. See the description on the website as to what comments you should have, and make sure you apply that in the code. Let's take a look at the actual issues. So make sure that you initialize the marray field to null pointer. This is not initializing it to anything. Down here, once again, it's not being initialized properly. Down here, please make sure you initialize marray to null pointer instead of making a new one element array. Down here, please move this initialization here into the base member initialization section. So it should be something like this instead of what's shown down there. That there's a reason why we do things in the base member initialization section. It makes it much easier to take a look at the code and make sure that it's properly initialized. Make sure that you use the get method on the objects, not trying to do something like this. That obviously won't work, or maybe not obviously won't work, but it won't work, so you have to be careful not to do that. Please use standard copy instead of using a for loop. This applies to pretty much anything in the code. Avoid the use of loops and try to use STL algorithms instead. Down here, you need to essentially clear, outsource, or set the values to 0. I think you probably could use clear to do that. Down here, make sure you use standard fill instead of using a for loop. Now, there's a bunch of issues people have with using scoped array in various ways. You don't need to make a temp scoped array here in the constructor. If you're going to do the STL algorithms, which you should be doing, you need to use .get here. Of course, you shouldn't be using temp in any case, but if you're using the STL algorithms, you need to use get so it can get the underlying pointer, because that works fine. Don't use a for loop. Instead, use fill or fill n. You don't need to use swap here, since you don't need to use temp, because this is the constructor. You don't need to do things with that exception safe idiom that we've talked about. And don't set these values again here. They were already set up above here at the top in the base member initialization section, which is where they should be set. For the copy assignment operator, you don't need to call clear. You also, this code needs to check for self-assignment. That's not implemented correctly. Go back and watch the videos that talk about how to do this. It's really done exactly the same way every single time. So once you get in the habit, it should be really trivial to write your copy assignment operator. Down here, another problem, this code is way too complicated. You don't need to do any of this stuff. Just use the idiom that we talk about in the videos. Should be something that you have seen over and over again, because that's how I do all the code in the course, in the videos. Down here, again, code too complicated. Don't need this loop. Just do the idiomatic way of using the copy constructor in conjunction with the swap method. Same thing down here. Don't make the call to individual swap methods. Just use the swap method that's defined in array list. That's why it's there. Now let's take a look at some issues with the move assignment operator. So down here, you should be using swap instead of writing all this code inline, and that'll clean up that problem. This implementation is also way too complicated. You just need to do a swap followed by clear, and so that'll clean it up. That also is very canonicalized. Same thing down here. This is way too complicated, so just get in the habit of using the types of idioms we talk about in class, and they're shown in the videos over and over again. This is also incorrect, so don't do this. Just make sure that you follow the idioms. Here's the clear method. You don't need to create a temp. You don't need to call swap. You just need to basically call marray reset and then set size and capacity to 0. Down here, there's a whole bunch of issues with the add method. The one parameter add method should just call the 2 parameter version rather than duplicating code, so you don't need to do that. This particular piece of code, in addition to just calling the 1 parameter this is the 2 parameter version. I left out a lot of stuff in here, but the main thing to do is note that code like this is not strongly exception safe, because you're assigning a value which could throw an exception, which could damage the underlying array or corrupt it. So you have to make sure that you do that on a temporary and then swap when you're all done at the end. Also, this code is not strongly exception safe, since copy and the assignment to marray sub index can throw exceptions and corrupt the underlying contents of the array. That's why we have the swap idiom at the very, very, very end. Make sure you document your code. A lot of people just wrote lots of code with no comments whatsoever. That is unacceptable. I'm not reviewing code like that. This is complicated code. You need to explain what it's doing, and that'll help you understand what it's doing as well. So this code is also not refactored properly. It's not exception safe. Once again, you're doing move operations, you're doing copies, you're doing assignments, and that's incorrect. You need to do those before you do the final swap. There's not even a swap there. This is also incorrect. Don't do swap until after you've done anything that could cause an exception. So it should be reversed. You don't want to be doing swap and then turn right around again and then do something that could throw an exception because you'll corrupt the underlying array. Let's see here. Don't call the one parameter version of add from the two parameter version. It should be the other way around, and use standard copy instead of a for loop. And note this code is not strongly exception safe, which is the goal of the assignment. This code here is way too long. It's not commented. It needs to be refactored. There's using loops everywhere. A lot of people wrote code this way. I think you can appreciate why I don't want to have to review code that's not commented, that is just lots and lots and lots of stuff. There's no explanation of what's going on, the rationale behind it, and it's also simply incorrect in most of the cases. So once again, notice we're doing assignments after we've done swaps or in lieu of doing swaps, so that won't be strongly exception safe. Please don't call the get method when you implement operator subscript. That defeats the purpose of operator subscript. Operator subscript is intended not to do range checking, whereas get does do range checking. Lots of problems with the remove. Once again, a lot of code isn't commented, so I didn't review it in most cases. This code is not strongly exception safe. You need to do the removing on a temp, and once that works, then you swap it back into marray. Don't use for loops, use copy. In fact, you probably need to use two calls to copy, but I'll let you work out the details. The set operation shouldn't be updating msize at all. It should just go ahead and set the value at the index, but not increment the count, of course. And then please use the swap method defined in marray rather than using the STL swap for that particular field. And then finally, you don't need to do an explicit instantiation of array list for type int. The compiler should handle that for you. So that's the end of the walkthrough of assignment 3. It's a lot more complicated, especially the add method and the remove method. That's more complicated. There's other subtle stuff there as well. So please make sure you go back and really think carefully about the idioms that we're describing and how to make your code strongly exception safe.